Allianz. Supporting all 32 counties through the Allianz Leagues.
Hello and welcome to the Tyrone Independent.ie's GA podcast in association with Allianz. I'm Will Slattery. I'll be joined as always by Michael Verney. Michael, hello.
How are you, Will?
Yeah, good, thanks. Last weekend of Allianz League action in the books. It's been a successful 2 weeks return overall. There was obviously a lot of question marks when things kicked off, but I think as we moved through the games and the weekends, the action kind of takes center stage, and I think people are getting maybe a little more hopeful that we can kind of get through the next couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, the talk was all of whether the games will go ahead. Now it's just what's going to happen in the games, and I think that's great. We're kind of just getting back into that normality of analysing games, analysing systems, analysing players, rather than, will it or won't it go ahead. So no, I think it's been great over the last 2 weeks, and the league, I maybe would have had question marks about it beforehand, but it sets up perfectly for championship now, particularly a knockout football championship. They're all coming in now. They've all had, well, some of them haven't had any games, or some teams have only had one game. Most have had two, and they're set up perfectly for championship now. And I think it's built up nicely just for that knockout championship. The fact you're not coming in cold and just one game and you're in or out. So it's set up perfectly over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we're going to be joined in a couple of minutes by Ciaran Whelan to go over the football action, as well as Donnchadh Boyle, who's going to join us as well. But before we bring in the guys, what are you looking forward to the most over the next couple of weeks?
Just to see, I was obviously very young the last time it was knockout championship, just to see what that brings to the table. It obviously, you're going to be missing that kind of atmosphere of, ravaging kind of fans, like mad for, it's everyone's there that Sunday, because there mightn't be another Sunday or there mightn't be another Saturday. So just to see, is there a clear kind of shift in, I suppose, physicality, everything, the enthusiasm, everybody. There's no back door now, so everyone should be going at it absolutely hell for leather. And I suppose that it's a real kind of throwback. 99, 2000 is the last time we saw that. So I suppose the fact that a shock is going to be a shock now for the year. There's not going to be, if Dublin are beaten, there's no way back in. If Dublin are beaten in the Super 8s last year, they can still come back and win their other two games, or whoever. Like Donegal, Tyrone is really, really interesting, because you're missing one of the top six are going to be gone after the first weekend. And maybe you wouldn't want it to be the case every year because of all the preparations they put in to be gone after one game. But for the year that's in it, I think it will raise the interest even more. And that's really the one you'd really, really have an eye on now next weekend.
Yeah, it promises to be very exciting over the next couple of weeks. But for the moment, we'll look back at the last weekend of Allianz League action. And we'll start with, I guess, a funny game in that it was both a league final in Division 1 in hurling and also the first round of the Munster Hurling Championship, Limerick versus Clare. And I'm going to be joined by Donnchadh Boyle as well as Michael Verney to discuss that. Donnchadh, how are things?
Good, Will. Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. It was a busy weekend of GA action once again. We'll start off with the hurling, because it was a funny game in Limerick and Clare that was both the league final, Michael, as well as the championship quarter-final in Munster. Limerick with a very impressive second half to run out 36 points to 123 victors. What stood out to you over the course of their performance?
I don't know, I'd say they did well to get Declan Hannon to force a smile while lifting the cup, because I'd say he didn't have much interest in lifting the cup after yesterday. It was all about the championship game for them, in fairness, and they went about their business really, really well. It was, I suppose there was a couple of interesting things. The fact that they didn't put a man marker on Tony Kelly was definitely one, and he was given probably, I'd say it's probably his best performance ever in a Clare shirt. He was absolutely phenomenal. But the fact that Limerick stuck with their guns and stuck with their game plan and weren't going to let, the fact that he was running riot or, how dangerous he was affect their game plan was probably definitely one thing. It's probably maybe a sign of hope for some other teams that maybe they know exactly what Limerick are going to do. They're going to play in a set position and play this pattern, so that maybe Liam Sheedy be looking at that. It's something that maybe he can get at when they play them in the Munster semi-final. But as far as Limerick go, back-to-back league titles, Munster champions last year, All-Ireland champions 2 years ago, it doesn't really get much more impressive than that. They're definitely a side for every season as well. They were playing as well yesterday as they were earlier on in February and March, and even as well as they would even last summer. So yeah, they're a fairly complete side, and they laid down their marker yesterday, showed everybody their championship aspirations for the summer.
Yeah, Donnchadh, did Limerick kind of live up to the favourites tag they have going into the championship with that performance, do you think?
Yeah, I think they have, and it looks like in the 5-6 months or whatever it was that we were off, that they haven't missed a beat. I think it was 5 wins from 5 before this, and then straight into a performance like that where 36 points, I think the second highest point scoring tally in championship. I think only, looking at it this morning, there's very good online account, GA Stats, and they have it that only Cork last year in 2019 scored more points, and that was 40 against Westmeath in a qualifier. So that sort of just underlines the amount, the scoring power they hold, as much, along with all the physicality and athleticism, because you've seen them running out onto the pitch yesterday, and they're just the shape they're in. They seem to be, and they're all big men and really mobile, and so yeah, they live up to it absolutely. And I think what's interesting as well, if you go back to roughly this time last year, when you had all that sort of fallout from New York, and you could have had any sort of a reaction to that, from within the panel, from within the county, and it just seemed to have, be it the squad themselves or John Kiely or a combination of both, it hasn't taken a bit out of them. I think that's pretty remarkable too. So, are they? Yeah, I think All Ireland favourites, absolutely, and rightly so.
And Mike Casey injury, Michael, you flagged last week as something that could be very crucial for them going forward. How did you feel the full back line held up against Clare?
Yeah, well enough. The goal was probably a miscommunication between Barry Nash, who's probably never played in the full back line, and who his underage career would have been as a half forward, as a corner forward. He ran into Sean Finn, and as a result, Ryan Taylor was able to pick up the break. There was probably a couple of little things like that. Like, I've played cornerback for years. The difference between playing cornerback and even wingback, they're just poles apart. As cornerback, you have to be, without being smart, you have to be pretty miserable, anti-sport, I would say, to play cornerback.
You have to play a bit of hurling at wingback, don't you?
Yeah. That's hence why I was playing cornerback. You have to be able to hurl. So yeah, like the cornerback, you're a stopper more than anything else. But to be fair, like Barry Nash was burst out with balls in the second half, which was definitely something promising for him. But it's poles apart, and their versatility has probably been affected by Richie English could move in full back, or he could play the other corner. Same with Sean Finn. Same with Mike Casey. Casey could go cornerback. It looks like they're going to leave Dan Morrissey full back. He probably wouldn't be all that comfortable in the corner. So it'd be interesting to see whether teams will try and go after that, particularly Tipperary. What they'll do, maybe they might position a couple of forwards in positions in the full forward. They might stack their full forward line to try and take advantage of that. So that's probably something they can't afford to pick up another injury in the backs. They're not that they're at their limit at the moment, but like Jerome Boylan is probably the other one, and maybe Aaron Costello, and they're kind of both be rookies. So they don't have a wealth of options there. They've lost two basically all-star worthy full backline players. So that'll be interesting. That'll be one thing. It'll definitely be a bit of solace for other teams and something that they might go after.
Yeah, Donnchadh, just a word on Clare. Obviously, they were big underdogs yesterday with the amount of absentees they have. John Conlon and Peter Duggan, to name two, who have been hugely influential over the last number of years. But is there reasons to be hopeful as they go into the back door? Like the performance of Tony Kelly, 17 points overall, including 8 from play, goes down as probably one of the great individual performances we've seen. Is there a reason to think they could rebound potentially in the back door?
I think they can, and I think you've seen it. Various teams have done it over the years. I think Clare as well will. We spoke about them for years about being potential laden, and maybe for a lot of people that haven't just lived up to that, to the quality they have in their team. John Conlon's a huge loss. Peter Duggan, Podge Collins. There's still an awful lot of talent there. The back door is going to be really hot and heavy, because you're literally fighting for your life now straight away. So we'll just see how that goes for them. But look, are they capable of it? Absolutely. But I suppose we say that about them an awful lot.
Yeah, well, we're moving on to the Alliance League football action now. I'm delighted to be joined as well by Dublin legend Ciaran Whelan. Ciaran, thanks for joining us.
No problem, Will. No bother.
Yeah, and it was an interesting final weekend. Obviously, the league was decided fairly early on Saturday with Kerry's big win over Donegal. And I think Joe Brolly described Dave Clifford as the Terminator sent back to end Dublin football. They're running the All-Ireland Championship. How impressed have you been with Kerry going into this championship in terms of maybe the growth they've shown since the final last year?
Yeah, listen, you're always expecting Kerry to get stronger and better, and would have taken a lot from last year's All-Ireland final, coming up for the first time with a relatively new young team under Peter Keane. So I don't think you can overread into the Donegal game, to be honest with you, though, because, Donegal, long journey down, nothing to play for, a bit of a dead rubber for them, left a few other key players off. Declan Bonner took a few off in the second half, like he took Steve McMahon off, who was actually doing okay on Clifford in the first half. And we know how good Clifford is, and we know he's going to get better, and we know the talent that he is. But I think from a Kerry perspective, they're definitely trying to work on a new system, whether it's a system they'll implement all the time or whether it's something they just want to rely on. They have a massive emphasis on the work rate, and I think that would have been the biggest thing that pleased Peter Keane was the tackle rate, particularly of his forward line, and they're dropping a bit deeper into the mid sector before they're putting that press on. So they're dropping back through the lines and they're trying to hit on the counter attack. And when they play on the counter attack, they have, between Thomas Sullivan, Gavin White at left half back, Paul Murphy, the pace, the massive pace lads, and they can just get away from fellas very, very easily, and that creates an overlap. And then when you've got Johnny O'Shea and Clifford on the other end of the field, and you've got like Tony Brosnan, who's been very good over the last 2 weeks and is playing with huge confidence as well, they look fairly dangerous. So I think Kerry will be happy. League title in the bag. They have 2 weeks to get ready for Cork. Definitely improving, but can you really read into the last 2 weeks? I'm not so sure. That they can only focus on their own game at this current time, and definitely you have to. The Donegal one comes with a bit of a health warning, but in terms of attitude, intensity, work rate, Keane would have been very happy.
Yeah, Michael, because as Ciaran says there, maybe that kind of defensive system or the counter-attacking play, that's something you kind of pointed out that you noticed that Kerry might be working on. And if you're working on it with 2 weeks to go to your big championship game against Cork, it's probably something that you're going to be trying. Yeah,
no, 100%. Yeah, they definitely look to have flooded a lot more bodies back. Like, that's not to say that it wasn't happening last year. It definitely was. There was a Paul Gainey point in the All-Ireland final last year, the drawn game, where I don't know if he soloed the ball up the full length of the field, but there was no one ahead of whoever the ball carrier was. It could have well been a Gainey, but they just have probably honed it a bit more. And as Ciaran said there, someone like a Gavin White, he's obviously was fairly well flagged as a minor and even as an under-20 and under-21 player. But just sometimes it just takes lads, a little bit longer. He was parachuted in there fairly young. He looks like he's really after kind of finding his feet. He has that McCaffrey-esque kind of pace. Well, I don't know if anyone has the same pace as Jack McCaffrey, but he was similar, and he was able to break tackles for that goal yesterday and finish really well. So the more foils and the more alternatives they have to Clifford, the better. Tomas O'Shea wrote on Saturday in the Independent that he was just maybe a small bit worried that they were relying too much on Clifford. The more guys that they have coming in, picking up some of the slack, the likes of Tony Brosnan, who obviously he's made a kind of miraculous recovery. I think he had a punctured lung with Dr. Crokes only about maybe 6 weeks to 2 months ago. He was playing great stuff in the club, and he's kind of carried that form in. Someone like a Micheál Burns as well. And then when you have defenders coming up and giving that scoring option, as Ciaran mentioned, Thomas Sullivan bombing forward and Gavin White as well, and even Paul Murphy too. It all just seems to be coming together. It seems to be coming together nicely. You can't obviously judge too much off league, but I'd imagine Peter Keane is fairly happy with where they are at the moment, and they'll just look a bit more solid at the back and a little bit less open than they were. So that's all positive for them. Hugely positive.
I think he's a bit of he has a task on his hand to find his best 15, and it might be very specific 15 for a very specific job on a given day. But like, if you look at Clifford is obviously going to start, and at the moment they have Tony Brosnan beside him, but that could also be former footballer of the year James O'Donoghue, who's obviously luckless with injuries, but he's had a little bit of form before the COVID break, and he picked up an injury. You have Killian Spillane come off the bench, I think got a goal in the All-Ireland final last year. Paul Gainey's 2 All-Stars, he can play there, obviously. Tommy Walsh offers something very different. So you're going to have to find a way. With Stephen O'Brien, we haven't seen too much of him, and he was, I think, maybe going into the All-Ireland semi-final or the drawn final, was probably in the Footballer of the Year conversation at one stage last year. So you have to, there's an awful lot of talent there, and about finding that mix and finding the right players to do the right jobs is one of the things now. And there's no time to find your feet. Like, normally you could say that, Kerry will, blow out the dirty petrol is the thing that you always be attributed to, but there is no time for that. Cork are in 2 weeks' time, and after last year's Munster final, I was down at it in Parky Queeve. They just went at them, played with absolutely zero fear. They had nothing to lose. They were after getting relegated to Division 3, and they caused them a load of problems that day. And I think you'll kind of have the same thing again. I think Ronan McCarthy and Cork will just go out and have a cut at them and see how they get on.
I think one of the interesting things, Will, in relation to their system is, if they're developing a new system, who is it in mind? Like, is it Dublin in mind? Obviously they probably see Dublin probably as the key threat. We all do, and they're probably favourites for the All-Ireland. But, we saw Kerry last year in the draw game play with a high press, at times, caused Dublin a bit of problem with Dublin caught them out. But then in the replay, we saw them sitting a lot deeper. And that kind of suited Dublin as well. Dublin played with great width and were able to pick them off. And just looking at the way they played over the last couple of weeks, you're kind of saying, you wonder if they came up against Dublin and they implemented a system like that, would it play into Dublin's hands that they end up sitting back and Dublin will be happy to control the game and pick them off. So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how they develop, but they're definitely in a good place in my opinion.
Yeah, Ciaran, and in terms of other kind of potential rivals to Dublin, obviously Mayo against Galway the previous weekend, 2-17 by half time. It was the opposite story yesterday. They were heavily behind against Tyrone, and while they did come back into the game, they ultimately were defeated, and that's their relegation to Division 2 for the first time since, I think, 1996. But is it probably more glass half full for James Horan going into the championship, or how would you read it?
Definitely, yeah. I know we're only a week or two to championship, but when you look at the league and you look at, Galway gave Tyrone a hosing back in February. Then Mayo come and hammer Galway, and then Tyrone come down and beat Mayo yesterday. It kind of makes a mockery of some of the results over the last couple of weeks. But I think the way Mayo finished the game would probably be more of a positive from James Horan's perspective. I think he'd be disappointed with the first 20-25 minutes, particularly the first half. They were very naive defensively. They played man-to-man at the back. Tyrone were playing with a strong wind. Mayo were badly exposed. He restructured the defence yesterday, and he put Cohen in full back and he put Kevin McLaughlin in centre back. And they were kind of at 6s and 7s, and Keegan was in the corner marking McCurry. So I just think they got it wrong in that first 20-25 minutes. Now, having said that, Tyrone were excellent, and they played with a higher line, and they moved the ball very, very quickly. And some young Canavan, he's only going to get better. Conor McKenna, lads, I can't even explain how good he played yesterday. This guy has just hit the ground running coming back from Australia. I've never seen anything like it. He was involved in everything. He's so powerful. He's so strong. He's 2 feet. He's a great kick past the ball. He can score. Amazing stuff for somebody that's been out of the game, and he's given Tyrone massive options, whether it's the middle, centre forward, full forward, and he was excellent yesterday. So Tyrone ripped him to shreds in the first 20-25 minutes, but Mayo kind of settled back into the game, and I think Horan will be. Listen, he'd be happy enough. Mayo like to play on the front foot, they like to play man-to-man football. That comes with its own risks. But he would have been very happy the likes of Tommy Conroy yesterday. He's a bit of a live wire. Having said that, I think he overcarried the ball 2 or 3 times yesterday when he was scoring, and if he gets pulled by referees, he's going to be in trouble. It's something he has to watch, but he's definitely dangerous. He's very direct. He goes at guys. He picked up a good few scores yesterday. It was a quiet day for Moran at centre forward and Aidan O'Shea. So the forwards didn't, and Cillian O'Connor didn't start. Darren Conn came in and was kind of hit and miss, done a couple of good things. So the forward line didn't really click. They still put 119 on the board. So yes, they're relegated, but I would think he won't be too disappointed, because I think Galway have a lot more to maybe find in Connacht. Roscommon are probably the real dangers lurking in the background as well down there. So now Horan be happy enough, but Tyrone definitely found a different way to play as well yesterday.
Donnchadh, can I just ask you a quick one? I know you did a piece on the AFL and guys that came back from the AFL and maybe haven't done that well, and it kind of highlights probably just how unbelievable of a talent McKenna is to come back and do what he's done in those 2 games. Can you just talk us through the percentages wise or numbers wise of lads that have maybe come back and even struggled to make an impact at inter-county level?
Yeah, so it was 63 fellas since it actually started with a newspaper ad in the Sunday Press, which I couldn't get my hands on because the National Library was closed. But 63 fellas have gone over since. Sean White went over first, but Paul Early from Roscommon was actually the first to play for Melbourne. About 400 lads responded to newspaper ads, and they were the first 2 to go over. But since then, there's been sort of on and off interest in it. A bit of a lull in it at times when the International Compromise Rules series was dropped. But about half of fellas who go over never play a senior match. Now, that's for a variety of reasons. Like some fellas, it's not a talent thing. Like for the likes of Ciaran Kilkenny, undoubtedly, I'm sure would have made a career over there, but he just opted to come home. Other fellas get injured, particularly not so much now because the gap has closed, but going back maybe 20 years, and maybe even fellas at Ciaran's vintage, maybe were going over there, and the step up in training was so significant that they'd break down. Like I spoke to Nicholas Walsh from Cavan before about that he went over and it just was opened up to a whole new world, and his body just couldn't handle it. So for fellas going over there, win a contract in the first place is amazing. What Zach Tuohy's doing, 200 games, is incredible. Mark O'Connor to play in a grand final is absolutely unbelievable, because they're going over at 19 or 18, playing a game they've never played before against fellas who've been playing all their lives. So I watched that game Saturday morning. It's a pity they didn't get over the line, but it's something that probably goes underappreciated here, what those lads are managing to do in the AFL, to get a contract in the first place and then to make a career out of it as series going.
Yeah, Michael, and like the Conor McKenna factor, like, Ciaran, the praise that Ciaran put on him there would make it seem like he could be a huge impact player in the championship for them. And then Dara Canavan as well, Peter Canavan's son as well, got a goal as well, showed a nice finish there. So there's a few options emerging for Tyrone.
Well, it kind of seems like with Conor McKenna that there's several different strings to his bow. He can go in full forward and he can get a ball in front and take on a man. He can be a playmaker out the field. We saw with Michael Murphy as well there the week before. He's well able to get tackles in around that kind of middle third as well. Big physical player too. He offers them so much in a year where they were probably writing off having that type of player available to them, particularly in the full forward line with Cottle McShane been out. He's just a huge asset. And Dara Canavan coming in, just looked a natural. I know he was named a cornerback yesterday. He was obviously going to play anywhere but there. But he looked really, really composed as well. He's had a couple of injuries. Don't know, did he have a broken thumb or something recently enough? He's not long back anyway. But obviously, been, as they call it, been son of God. He's a natural as well. But they have, it looks like all of a sudden they kind of have, a couple of kind of new options, particularly up top, which they probably badly need.
I think the big thing with is what way will they play? That's the big question for me. Yesterday they kind of played man to man. They didn't have that system where they all, when they can see kickouts, you see them dropping back inside the 50 and defending the 50-yard line. Yesterday, particularly in the first half, a little bit more defensive in the second half when they were playing against the wind, but they went man to man yesterday, and they have quality and they have good kick passers and they have good footballers. And yes, they've been left themselves open a few times when they play that system. But they go to Donegal next week. And for me, if they play like they did against them in the league last week, Donegal, I think, will open them up, because Donegal play with great width and they're well used to dealing with that system. So it will be interesting to see what Hart throws at Donegal next week. Will he go with something different? I think he has to, in my view. But definitely Tyrone played a different way yesterday, and personally I think it suits their style, it suits the quality of player they have.
Yeah, Donnchadh, it's an interesting one looking at next week's game, especially with the view of the league clash 2 weeks ago, where Donegal's goals, Tyrone's defence just parted completely, and they were completely carved open. And as Ciaran said, they looked to be playing slightly different yesterday. How instructive is that league game 2 weeks ago, do you think, in terms of what we might see next weekend, or were teams holding back a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's no one going to be revealing the full of their hand at that stage. You can say that maybe both teams were maybe looking over their shoulder a little bit, but I think that there was a bit of shadow boxing in that one. Next weekend, Ciaran made an interesting point. If that would be a fairly significant sea change for Tyrone if they were going to go down that road, and he highlighted it last night, and start these long raking balls. Some of them have been, some of them were just really top-notch kicking that maybe we haven't seen that much from them. So, and in the absence of Cottle McShane, which was obviously their fulcrum of their attack last year, and now all of a sudden Conor McKenna's come in and is fulfilling a variety of roles. Dara Canavan is fit, big tout of talent, but finally they got him on the pitch. So maybe they have a different hand to pull from now, and they're going to play a slightly different way.
Yeah, and Ciaran, we've talked about the challengers. Maybe we talk about the champions for a second now. Dublin, obviously, with 2 wins from 2 in the league since they returned, and some young players getting more exposure. Paddy Small, Sean Bugler, Robbie McDade, all making contributions. With such a kind of a strange, landscape for Desi Farrell coming in, a few key men stepping away, the championship structure changing. Where do you see Dublin being at going into this championship?
I don't think they're firing on all cylinders, Will, if I'm being honest with you, based on the last 2 weeks. I know they've had no challenge games and they've only had 2 games, and I suppose every week you're going to expect that they're going to improve. I thought, you know, to start the Meath game last week, they were going to kind of kick on and blitz them, but they didn't really, and they left themselves a little bit exposed at the back, and Meath had numerous chances to expose them. Yesterday was slightly different in that the conditions were fairly bad. We all know it's like playing Pearse Park. When a wind blows in Pearse Park, it's horrible. And they played into the wind in the first half, and I thought Galway gave them far too much respect and probably were very edgy coming into the game on the back of last week's performance, and they sat back when they played with the wind, and they let Dublin control the game. And apart from Paul Conroy, Galway, you know, didn't look to have a whole lot of attacking threat up front with Shane Walsh on the bench. So Dublin controlled the game, and that's probably what gave them the platform going into the second half. With that win, they're always going to pick off a few scores, but like it was a good, decent performance, sloppy at times. I'd say Desi would like to cut down on some of the turnovers, but you have to, you know, the conditions would have contributed to that. So they're not firing, you know, to the level that I'd say he wants them to get to. Positives, Paddy Small, yesterday, you know, he's put his hand up in the forward line, kicked 2 brilliant points into a very stiff wind yesterday, and got 2 good marks in the second half. John Bugler came off the bench. Young Keane Murphy done reasonably well at corner back again. So like there is guys that are putting their hand up to push into that first 15. Kilkenny was excellent. Fenton was brilliant in the first half, as he usually is. So yeah, I'd say Dublin are, you know, 75% where they probably want to be, and hoping that those 2 games will get the cobwebs off, and that they should start improving. You know, they probably have that advantage where they have a bit of time. They're not waiting for next week to go into a big game. You know, Kerry have Cork on the horizon, which they have to respect. You know, Tyrone and Donegal next week, and then the Connacht lads are going to be clipping off each other the next couple of weeks as well. So Dublin probably have that a few weeks extra to get themselves toned up, but a bit of work to do, a bit of improvement to do, in my opinion.
Yeah, like it's the All-Ireland semi-final is the 5th or 6th of December, that weekend. So that's 6 weeks from now, roughly. So I think they have that time, and they do have the games to sort of warm themselves up, and it sort of builds up quite nicely. They'll have probably, you'd expect maybe one of Meath or Kildare in the Leinster final, which would be a decent test. At least it could be, or you know, that will be a step up in opposition, and then they'll have an All-Ireland semi-final. So you know, they have plenty of time to get it right. And I suppose the fact that they haven't been in the challenge game circuit just shows you what they're trying to do over these last couple of weeks, and in the couple of weeks to come, that they'll just build it up as it
yeah,
comes.
Donegal, I think, you know, you were covering, I think, the Monaghan Meath game yesterday. Did you see anything in that game to indicate there could be some sort of challenge pushed up to Dublin and Leinster?
No, to be honest. Like Meath are improving, you know, no doubt about it, and that game was sort of their sort of just their Division 1 season in 70 minutes. That was it. Like, they fell asleep for the start. They were 1-4 to a point down. At the first water break, Andy McEntee's team talk was in front of the press box, and it wasn't for repeating what he was saying. Just went through them, and then we got very competitive. There were a goal down at half time, and Jordan Morris came on and kicked 7 points. He's actually from a neighbouring club of mine in Nobber. And we've known about him for a long time. He's a very talented fella, beautiful left foot in him. He kicked 7 points, including the last 3 and the equaliser from play, which was a lovely score. But so yeah, Meath got a point. They probably deserved to pick up maybe a little bit more than they did, but I think that's the harsh realities of life in top tier football. Like, going into yesterday, they'd lost 3 Super 8 games and 6 Division 1 matches, so there's still an awful lot to do to get to that level. Monaghan, for their part, like, Conor McKenna got a goal, I think it was 65 or 60 minutes, 66 minutes, and I think that put him at 1-7, and he got another point and he had 1-8, and it was the most understated 1-8 you'll ever see in your life. Like, he was just sort of tipping about, and when he got the goal, I couldn't believe he had done that. It was just because he's just judged by such standards now that, you know, him getting 1-8 was nearly not that remarkable for a player of his ability. So, and Banty was all business afterwards too. He was thanking sponsors, the outgoing Investec, and thanking the All-Borough Flooring Company in New York that he got in to sponsor Monaghan after the game. So he was full of chat about that, and, you know, just pointing out that Division 1 is sort of, under normal circumstances when it's a crowd, it's big business as well as anything else. It's good for sponsors. It's good for getting people through the gate. They're guaranteed to have maybe Kerry or Dublin coming to Monaghan next year. So there was a big sigh of relief for them. And obviously they're straight into it with Cavan on Saturday afternoon next weekend. Again, that's kind of a free shot for Cavan in that one. I think Monaghan will be very wary of that going in. I think they gave them a good decorating last year in the Ulster Championship. So, they Monaghan are looking at 4 consecutive weekends of Ulster Championship action if they keep winning, which is a massive ask.
I guess just on Meath, you mentioned there the record in the Super 8s in Division 1. It was a similar story. I think when Kildare got promoted a couple of years ago, they lost all their games and they ultimately got to the Super 8s but didn't win a game there either. So it shows maybe the Leinster second tier under Dublin.
Roscommon as well. Roscommon have got up into the top flight. They struggled, and they're a team who've won like Connacht Championships and beaten the likes of Galway and Mayo in Championship football, and they still can't operate at that level regularly to stay up. So getting up from Division 2, which is a very hard thing to do, and forcing your way into the top 6 in Division 1, there's still a big distance there for teams.
Yeah, just to finish up, guys, maybe a quick look at some of the other divisions. It was Limerick ended up winning Division 4 and head-to-head. Wicklow got promoted as well after beating Wexford, and they actually play next weekend again, which will be an interesting game. Division 3 was kind of sewn up beforehand. Cork and Down go up there. But Division 2, as always, Michael, provided a load of drama. Cavan ended up they could have got promoted if results had gone their way. Instead, they ended up going down because Armagh beat Clare, and Laois had a late rally against Fermanagh. Very disappointing for them going into that big game against Monaghan next weekend.
Yeah, they were only in Division 1 a couple of years ago. I remember them playing the Dubs in, I think it was Matty McLean's first match in charge of Cavan. It was in Clones, I think, or was it? No, it was in Breffni Park. It's only a couple of years ago. Now they're down in Division 3. The margins are unbelievably fine. But when you get into you're up to Division 1, it's absolutely cutthroat. You get into Division 2, you're expecting anybody could beat anybody on a given day. Just that for Armagh even getting promoted as well. Like, in fairness, Ciaran McGeeney probably goes about his business. He has critics. He's definitely has critics over the last couple of years. Even when he was over Kildare, he had critics, but he's gotten Armagh up to a really, really high level. They're probably still, I know they're playing Division 1 football next year. They're probably still, I'd say, just off the top 6, no more than maybe Roscommon probably will be. But he's done an unbelievable job there, and they play a lovely style. They've loads of lovely forwards, free scoring kind of a side. Maybe not what people expected from him, and that's a massive level of progress for them as well. And yeah, just Division 2 no more than, let's say, the Joe McDonough and hurling. Any of the teams, you could throw a blanket over the majority of them, they could beat each other on a given day. But real kind of tight stuff. A bit of a disaster, I suppose, for Cavan going down, no more than Mayo going down to Division 2 for next year as well. But it's kind of a funny kind of a year, and their league form will be quickly forgotten in Cavan if they can turn around and beat Monaghan this weekend.
Yeah, Ciaran, are there any of the Division 2 teams you think could make an impact in the championship? I guess it's a knockout nature this year. Michael mentioned Armagh there, that they have a tendency to put up big scores a lot of the time. Anyone jumping out at you there who could make a nice step up?
I suppose, well, looking the last couple of weeks over the last, definitely Roscommon are not in a bad position at all, and they made 8 changes going up to Cavan, and they played with great energy. They're able to bring back in the Murta brothers. The Smith brothers were excellent. They changed the whole half-back line. So they had the COVID issues and still performed really, really well. So they have a depth. They have a good system. They're working very, very hard, and to be able to slot in 8 different players and play to that same level is quite impressive. So Roscommon are very, very dangerous. Again, good forwards. Strong enough midfield. So I'd say they're in a nice place going in, kind of under the radar in Connacht. Cavan, very disappointing. I think Cavan have gone backwards, if I'm being honest with you. Yes, they're missing a lot of players, but lacking firepower up front, and I think they could struggle against Cavan, or they could struggle against Monaghan next week. They didn't play with any sense of urgency the other day, which was disappointing considering they needed to get something out of the game. Armagh for me, Michael's touched on it. Some great forwards, Oisin O'Neill in the middle of the park. Rian O'Neill is a beast in the edge of the square, and they can bring him in and out. Rory Grugan playing very well. Stephen Campbell came off the bench, made an impact. They're playing well for 35, 40 minutes of games, but they're drifting out of games, and Clare caused them a lot of difficulty, particularly in the third quarter. Got back level, and it was, you know, you were looking kind of at the game on Saturday and you're saying Armagh have totally dominated this game, but all of a sudden it's a draw with 10 minutes to go and you're wondering how Clare got back into it. They're conceding a lot of silly frees, 7 frees I think, a lot of needless fouls off the ball, so their discipline at the back is pretty poor, and they're a little bit vulnerable when they run at, so they still have a bit to improve, but definitely moving in the right direction. And the one other team that, you know, are quietly plodding along the last few games with victories is Kildare. And, you know, good win against Westmeath. And they've kind of found a few new forwards, and Derek Kirwan, the edge of the square, Jimmy Hylands, he's small in stature but can cause a lot of difficulties. Ben McCormick is back. Daniel Flynn probably still has to come back into the equation. A few good forwards, and Kevin Feely playing very well in the middle of the park. And they've had a couple of wins on the bounce as well. So they're quietly plodding along. While Meath are probably getting a lot of the attention because they're in Division 1. Kildare, I think, are at a reasonable enough level, and you would expect Meath and Kildare to come through in Leinster, and that's going to be if the two of them come through to Meath in a Leinster semi-final, that's going to be a ding dong of a game. So yeah, there's a few teams that are on upward curve, which is positive overall for the championship. But your concern would be, my concern over the next couple of weeks is that some of the weaker teams may check out, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. You know, we've seen a lot of them have had COVID issues, and you know, health is obviously a priority, but you know, they're looking at the inevitable in the next couple of weeks, coming up against some of the big teams, and you know, with a straight knockout and no backdoor available, you know, we could have a few one-sided games in the next couple of weeks before we get into the thick of it, which might be disappointing.
Ciaran, I have to ask you, after watching the Sunday game last night and after watching Conor's sketches, have you got your gloves on this morning?
No, I haven't got them. You know, I have a few pairs in the shed, Michael. You know, I mean, get you. Still, obviously,
when you're getting when there's a parody of you, when there's someone's doing you a sketch, you know you're big time then.
Oh, geez, I don't know about that.
Just to go on that, well, Kildare, I saw Kildare last weekend against Cavan, and you know, you're looking at them, and they started that day with Jimmy Hyland, Ben McCormick in the full forward line, and they had a debutant as well, Derek Kirwan, and they look really good. And then at the same time, they have Daniel Flynn, Niall Kelly, won't play either. So they have like serious talent there. Kevin Feely is one of the best fielders of the ball in the country, I would say. And you are always looking at them waiting to explode, but a little bit like they blow hot and cold, a bit like Armagh. They were 10 points up against Cavan, and Cavan came to within a good hand pass of just a simple hand pass going right of getting level in that game after being 10 points down. So like that's the question mark that hangs over Kildare as well. But certainly on paper you're thinking, geez, they seem to have an awful lot of the right things to step up and take the next level. And you'd imagine Jack O'Connor is the man to do that with them.
And just on Armagh, their record in Ulster has been atrocious under Kieran McGeeney. It's the qualifiers where they've really excelled, and obviously there's no backdoor this year. They have Derry first up, and then I think they play the winners of Donegal and Tyrone if they can get over that hump. So a tough draw for them if they do want to make an impact. And Michael, I might give you the last word then. Any Division 3 or 4 team you're particularly intrigued to see how they go over the next few weeks? Just a word maybe on Wicklow manager Davy Burke. I saw Colin Keys tweeted that in the last 3 years he's won an under 20 All-Ireland with Kildare. Kildare Championship with Sarsfield has now got Wicklow into Division 3, which is a very impressive CV. But any teams there you'd like to see over the next couple of weeks?
No, Davy Burke would have been the one I pulled out because I think RTE went out to the Centre of Excellence in Wicklow the night training started back, county training, and just he was buzzing around, absolute kind of just full of enthusiasm. He's obviously a young man, he's in his early 30s, and what he's done throughout, you know, the early stages of his career has been phenomenal. You know, Wicklow have kind of been tiling in Division 4 pretty much for the guts of the last, 10 or 15 years. So what he's done there is brilliant. But like, there's no like big household names that we all know of. So the job he's done there is huge, and I think it'd be massive success for him if they're able to. They're already up playing Division 3 football for next year. If they're able to get a win over Wexford again, another win over Wexford next weekend. Wexford's an interesting one too. They obviously have no more than Niall Carew in Carlow. Shane Roach is only just in, like he's only there. Just looking at the calendar, he's only in charge about 5 weeks now at this stage. So he's coming up against David Davy Burke is obviously, he's not in Wicklow a huge length of time either, but you probably would be favouring probably Wicklow in that one. And just, I'd imagine the Kildare job is what Davy Burke is eyeing in the next couple of years. So to see the progress that he's made with both Sarsfields winning the county title and even with Wicklow already getting promotion, he's definitely going to be a manager that we're going to hear an awful lot more of over the next couple of years.
No, definitely plenty of intrigue as we wrap up the Alliance Football Leagues, and lots to look forward to over the next couple of weeks too. Ciaran, Donegal, Michael, thanks so much for joining me.
Cheers, Will.
Thanks, Will.